Hello everyone, welcome from Los Angeles here in sunny Southern California. This is the Petersen Automotive Museum. I'm Jason. I'm going to be walking you through today to show you some of what we have, to go over kind of a little bit of the history of the car, but focus a lot on the science and innovation behind cars. I'm here with my good friend Lightning McQueen. He won't be joining us, he's going to stay here on the floor. But we have a variety of automobiles that will kind of hopefully perk your interest and help you learn a little bit about science and history. We have cars from Guardians of the Galaxy, or kind of sitting here right in the front, we have a hot rod owned by my good friend Iron Man. So let's go hit the floors. In the 1700s, as soon as people were learning how to put together steam engines and the like, there was a desire to motorize carriages and carts and everything people used to get around. This picture you have behind me here is of a 1769 vehicle known as the Cuneau, which we really treat as the very first quote-unquote car. The problem is, as you can tell, is it wasn't very practical. That giant thing on the front was a steam boiler, and it wasn't reliable, it wasn't easy to get around in. So where we really trace the history of the car to is this right here. This is the 1886 Benz patent motor wagon. And this truly is held up as the first practical car. And looking at it, you'll notice there's many things that are different. There's no body on it, there's no roof, there's only 3 wheels, and the wheels themselves are these giant thin things. They aren't car stores yet. There's not auto parts store. They're using what they have, which is carriage wheels, bicycle wheels. It's over time that we learn shorter and fatter wheels are actually better. You also will notice the engine is open. Here again, just not having a body in the car means everything's out in the clear, which probably isn't the best for driving around on a rainy day. But even on that note, even with all these differences, this engine is a car engine just like you would see today, just a little bit smaller. It runs on 4 strokes. There's an intake stroke that has a piston come down in a cylinder and bring in a lot of fuel and air. Then you compress that. And as you learn in your science classes, when you compress a gas, the molecules start hitting against one another more and more, which heats it up. It makes it more volatile. The beginning of the 3rd stroke then is when a spark plug lights that volatile mixture up and causes it to explode, forcing that piston down, creating all of the power actually from the engine. And then finally, the piston goes back up and squeezes the exhaust out. Those are the 4 strokes of an engine that happen in all internal combustion engines out there today as far as in cars. Now, the cars you see out there will have 4, 6, 8, or however many of these cylinders with all this action in. Here, it's 1. There's a single cylinder. So whereas cars today, you'll talk about being measured in the hundreds of horsepower, this engine puts out about 3/4 of a horsepower, which would drive this vehicle up to about a speedy 10 miles per hour. The other thing that you may notice here is this giant apparatus surrounding it. This is known as a flywheel. Now notice what we were talking about with the engine, that there's these 4 strokes, but only one of which, that 3rd stroke where everything explodes, creates any power. So if you're basing everything solely on the action of an engine, a reciprocating engine like that, you face a situation where your car would be moving like doom, pause, 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 doom. It would be very, start and stop because only 1 out of 4 strokes is providing any power to the engine. Well, in modern cars, you have multiple cylinders, so where that power comes will be at different times, helping to spread the power, but it would still be very jumpy. This is why cars have flywheels, and they may not look the same today. They may not be these giant things sticking out the back, but inside the engine, you would still have a flywheel. Flywheels can be thought of as a mechanical battery. You have something, an engine that provides power that gets this thing spinning. Well, just like if you spin a top, I don't have to keep sitting there spinning it for the top to go. Once I spin it, it's going to keep going for a little bit. So if I use my engine to power a flywheel and get it spinning, this will keep spinning even if the engine at that moment isn't providing power. It's just the engine coming along, occasionally surging the power to get this going. It's all some of the brilliant innovation that goes into making a car. The last thing I want to mention about this flywheel, though, is you'll notice since I have no dashboard or anything, I don't have anywhere to stick a key. Cars don't run that way yet. To get that motion of the engine going, You had to start it up yourself, and then eventually the power of the engine would take over. The way you got this one started, you would walk around back, grab this flywheel, and sit here and start spinning it until your engine started up. Not the easiest way to start a car. Fortunately, along the way, someone came up with the electric starter that allowed us to turn a key. This is the 1967 Ford GT40 Mark III. Now, there was a movie that came out at the end of the last year called Ford vs. Ferrari that if you've seen it, you kind of know some of the story. But this is a situation about some of the driving forces of innovation are there for the marketplace, what consumers want, but some of the sources of innovation are motorsports. I want to go faster. It's one thing to drive, but a whole lot of people, when they get behind the wheel, they want to drive fast, and at a minimum, they want to drive faster than the person next to them. This is the whole reason racing exists. And racing goes back to the beginning of the car in many ways. The Ford GT40 emerges in the 1960s as a response to Ferrari. Ferrari had been dominating racing in the early 60s. They won the 24-hour Le Mans in 1958, and then every year between 1960 and 1965. Well, Ford wanted part of this action, so they go off and help develop the Ford GT40. The 40 in the name comes from the fact that the car is only 40 inches high. The GT, Gran Turismo, Grand Touring, it's the class of racing it would be in. Now, that's the story, and eventually in 1966, Ford GT40s placed first, second, and third at Le Mans, and Ford wins Le Mans every year in the rest of the 60s. So the Ferrari dynasty gives way to a Ford dynasty. But I come here for a science lesson because this gives us a lot of idea about how a car looks and all that is part of the science of the automobile itself. We talked about with that Bugatti how the flowing lines and all that were there for style. In this case, every curve, every line you see in the car is there for a reason, and the reason is speed. I need a car that cuts through the air. I need a car that is aerodynamic. So instead of those early cars that you saw, very flat fronts, very boxy, that isn't very good getting through the wind, this car has a short, slender body that is angled and sloped in such a way that air can more easily get over the car. Now the thing is all these design features and all that are not just for cutting through the air, it's for utilizing air. You want to direct air in particular ways. One thing that goes on as you get cars that go faster and faster is there's a tendency for them to, particularly when you turn, to lift up some. Think of that sheet of paper lying on the ground when some wind blows up. It will catch underneath it and blow it off. So what I want in a car as I go fast is I want to stick to the ground. I don't want a lot of air getting under me, which is why you would tend to see a low floor plane. You also see directions and that, right, splitters on the front and the like that will direct air out to kind of create a vacuum underneath to suck me in. It's also, though, why you will have features such as wings, or in this case, a tiny spoiler on the back of the car that will help direct that flow and create what's known as downforce to help press me into the ground. So I can go faster and faster and have less worry about the fact that I may catch some air and flip or the like. The other reason you may have certain curves and why you have things like these deep intakes, right, a grill coming out front with all this, is that engines are hot. All that energy, all that chemical energy coming out of the fuel burning and all that friction energy coming out of pistons moving and everything else creates a lot of heat. So beyond directing air and all that to keep my handling the way I want it, you also have features added to cars and all that to direct air, to cool your brakes off, to cool your engine off and the like. And we're now on our second floor, which are our industry floor. We get a little bit more in depth on the design feature, the manufacturing of cars and the like. And I have 3 mid-engine Porsches lined up for you from 3 different generations. This is a 1955 Porsche 550 Spider, the Spider name convertible, but we won't focus in on all the different types of names for cars. But the reason we have these 3 cars lined up is they're all mid-engine Porsches. And what I mean by mid-engine is whereas we're used to seeing engines up here, or sometimes in a Beetle and all that, you'll see it in the very back. Mid-engine cars are where the engine is placed between the rear axle and the front axle. And it's usually right here behind the driver. Now, why would I do that, right? And you're not going to see mid-engine cars very much on, right, your family sedans and the like. Why would I do it at all? Why is the brand new Corvette that's out there getting all of the press for being the first mid-engine Corvette? The reason I may want a mid-engine car is weight distribution. Engines are big, heavy parts of the car. So if I'm looking for a car that goes fast and handles well, having an engine that's somewhat closer to the center, balanced between the wheels, helps me balance the overall weight of the car, which may improve handling overall. Now you may say then, well, why not do that for every car? The problem is if I have a family, I don't want my back seat to be my engine. I want cabin space. I want room for my family and my luggage and everything else. So here again, the design choices I make, the layout of the car and everything else is going to be driven by a multiplicity of factors. In this case, no one was worried about family. You notice there's only really room for one person in this car. You go with a mid-engine design. And they've done, and Porsche has done this over several times. That was a 550 from the 50s. Here's a 914 from 1972. This was actually a Porsche partnership with Volkswagen that did the original design on this car. Leading up to a 2015 Porsche 918. Now, beyond being mid-engine, this car is also a little bit special because it's not just an engine, it's engines. It's engine and motor, meaning it's a hybrid. Not only do you have an internal combustion engine in this car spitting out hundreds of horsepower, you have electric motors on top of it that will give you even more power. Now, you may think of a hybrid and think of a Prius and think of climate change and everything else, which we'll get to some of those discussions in a minute. But you may be curious why this, which is obviously a high-performance sports car, it's a Porsche, why this would be a hybrid. Why would I want to build a hybrid sports car? Well, the reasons we may add electric power to a car don't just come down to solving pollution. Having two motors means I have twice the power. I can take all that power from my internal combustion engine, combine it with the power from an electric motor, and get even faster, have even more horsepower. The other dynamic, though, is that internal combustion engines will provide lots of power, far more than an electric motor, once they get going. But it takes a little bit of time for all that motion in the engine to get going and for an internal combustion engine to provide maximum torque, which is rotational force. And keep in mind, cars are driven by rotation, so I'm always interested in torque. Compared to that, though, electric motors, as soon as you complete that circuit, you have maximum torque. So electric motors are great for providing acceleration. When you're sitting there at zero and you turn the engine on, and as soon as you release that pedal, the brake pedal, and slam on the gas, electric motors have all of that torque available to start accelerating you. Once the internal combustion engine gets going, it will provide more total power than that electric motor. So combining those all, I get that great acceleration with that great top-line power at the end. So as you saw in the past couple cars, there's obviously a move to electrification. And a lot of people are noticing this and think, wow, this is a brand new thing, right? Tesla must have invented electric cars. And that is so not true. Electric cars actually predate internal combustion engine cars. In 1900, there were more electric cars on the road, and everyone thought that the electric cars were the future as compared to internal combustion. Over time, though, internal combustion got a little bit more efficient, and most notably, we invented the electric starter, so instead of turning that big flywheel or cranking up a car, you could just get in and turn a key. All of these led to the dominance of internal combustion by the 1910s, 1920s. But as I said, electric cars go way back. This is a 1915 Detroit Electric, fully electric vehicle. And electricity is electricity. The technology of an electric motor is the same in 1915 as you would see today. What's changed is the materials we use to make stuff, and most importantly, the batteries we make. This car got about 50 miles of range on a good day, whereas you can get an electric car today that gets upwards of 200 or more miles of range. You also, as I just mentioned, an electric motor, right, get all that torque instantly, so a lot of electric cars are used in high-performance cars such as that Porsche 918, which will go upwards of 200 miles per hour. This car struggled to get up to about 50 miles per hour and was absolutely awful trying to go up hills. So the technology is basically the same, it's just improved over time, and electric cars are becoming a lot more viable. Nowadays, the big push for electricity and electrification is climate change or pollution. We want cleaner cars. 100 years ago, that was not their concern. Well, it wasn't for the same reasons. It was needing cleaner cars, but not because of climate change, but because of gender dynamics. 100 years ago, there were fairly strict gender roles, and women tended to wear very nice dresses and not like to get dirty. Well, cars were dirty, right? You had to get out, you had to crank them up, there was a lot of effort, they spit out a lot of soot. Electric cars promise cleanliness and ease. All I have to do is hop in, push a button, and my car is running. So you will notice in this car, if you take a peek inside it, it's set out for comfort. The seat in the front faces backwards. It's like a little tea parlor. There's flower vases next to the doors. The high roof you see on it is because women of the day tended to wear hats, large hats, and this allowed them to get in. So nowadays, a lot of those strict gender ideas and all that have been abandoned, right? We realize that men and women can both get dirty or both stay clean. It doesn't really matter. But we've returned to electrification several times in history, including the modern moment, where we're doing it because we're worried about things like the climate. This modern moment has led to a whole bunch of companies come out and envision the electric cars in a lot of different ways. So companies such as Tesla, or in this case Karma, are trying to find replacements for the everyday vehicles we all drive. They're building electric sedans. Other companies, though, are pushing the bounds in other ways. So you get this, such as the FF0 concept car. This car is imagining high-performance vehicles in an electric way. And it's a concept car. One thing that goes on with concepts is that you're testing all kinds of ideas, not just the underlying technology, but also the style decisions and everything else. So you wind up with fairly striking looking vehicles. Unclear if you would ever produce this as the actual car on the road, but you're at least grabbing some people's attention. I love the open top, although maybe getting in isn't as easy because there's no doors or anything. I actually have to climb fully into this car, into what looks like a spaceship pod or something to me on the inside. So we have one set of extremes from the family-ready, easy-to-get-around sedan to the high performance. There's also variances in size. Here you have a car built for getting around crowded urban landscapes. It's a one-seater. There's not even room for a passenger. At the same time, electric power doesn't have to be in small packages. You also get vehicles such as this Bollinger. This is reimagining the SUV in an electric world. And it's made for rugged use. It's got that electric power, but it's also got an interior that can be fully hosed down to clean. There's no carpet or anything to get in the way. And also, in the back and also in the front, you have these tailgates that fold down in case you're carrying long poles or something and need to get around. You can have your cargo sticking out both ends. Now, of course, the name I keep mentioning is Tesla. Here you'll see one of the very first Teslas ever made. And here again, when you're starting off, you don't start making everything. Elon Musk and the Tesla crew's idea was they had some ideas about what electric cars should be, so they went and got a car from Lotus, a Lotus Elise, that is the underlying chassis that they put all the electric components in. Nowadays, they make their own chassis and everything else. But when you're first starting and testing your technology, if you're not worried about making a new chassis, that's just you need one, just get one off the shelf. But anyways, hopefully you've enjoyed yourself. You've had a sampling of a variety of different types of cars, maybe learned a little bit of science along the way. There's all kinds of other stuff out there I encourage you to explore. Cars are one of the most critical inventions of the past century. They've affected a whole lot about who we are and how we live. But they also are a good example of how a person's ideas, their ideas of what something should look like, can go through a design process and turn into a finished product. Thank you all for joining us.